Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Fortnite In Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the M4 Assault Rifle, also known as the M16 Assault Rifle, also known as the American Assault Rifle, also known as the Not the Scar Assault Rifle. And I was going to include the Scar in this one as well, but today we're doing the M4 only because the Scar rifles are actually coded into their own tier, and given the amount of damage that they do and the slightly different types of recoil, I wanted to cover them in their own episode. I think it's much better to compare all the M4 rifles together, and one of the things that all of these rifles do have in common is that they all have the exact same rate of fire. The M4 rifle's rate of fire is 330 rounds per minute across all of the rifles, which is kind of slow. Well, it's a little bit slower than you would think for this game, but compared to most other shooters, Call of Duty, Battlefield, PUBG, CSGO, or pretty much any other shooter that you've played, these rifles fire very, very slowly. I believe it is a design choice to kind of balance out time to kill, but it's a little bit unusual, and I personally, instead of going fully automatic with them, use them in small bursts or semi-auto, pulling the trigger very, very quickly, because that will, of course, reduce your recoil. But what a lot of you want to know about these weapons is their damage, and I know you can see the damage numbers when you shoot people, but it's interesting to compare to DPS and shots to kill, time to kill, and all that sort of stuff. So the M4 Assault Rifle damages are 30 for gray, 31 for green, or 33 for blue. Headshots are double damage, so if you've got a gray one, that's 60, 62 for green, and 66 for blue. So you can see they're pretty similar, but they start drifting apart from each other when it comes to headshots. However, you also need to consider the raw DPS when you're shooting multiple targets, when you're taking down a building, or when you're adding mixed damage in with your teammates, and there's a pretty big difference once you're looking at raw DPS. The gray one is 165, green is 182, and the blue rifle is 193. Now, of note, if you look these up online, you'll see some decimal places, but I just rounded the numbers for my sanity. In our shots to kill comparison today, we're only going to be comparing the gray M4 to the blue M4, and that's because the green one doesn't outperform the gray one at any normal health combination. At 75 health, at 100 health and 25 shield, at 75 health and 75 shield, at 200, at any normal, like sane round or ending on a 5-number combination of health, the green rifle just doesn't outperform the gray one in any way whatsoever, so it was kind of unnecessary to make that comparison and waste your time. So let's take a look at early game. You've just landed and you've grabbed a gray M4 rifle. If you find another guy that just landed and doesn't have any shield yet, it'll kill in 2 shots to the head or 4 shots to the body. Of note, it does a lot of damage to the body, all of them do, so if they've taken a little fall damage or a little tickle from somebody else, that might go down to 3. If you have a blue M4 rifle, it's basically the same thing early game, 2 to the head and 4 to the body, with no difference in time to kill because the rate of fire is the same too. However, if we're looking at mid to late game, things get a little bit more interesting. If you find an enemy that has 100 health and 25 shield, or 75 health and 50 shield, it's the same thing, 125 total health, a gray M4 rifle will require 3 headshots to kill and 5 body shots to kill. However, the same enemy with that same 125 health will die in 1 shot earlier to the blue M4 rifle in 2 shots to the head or 4 to the body. So it saves you a shot to kill by upgrading your tiers, and in my opinion, that is very, very much so worth it. However, by the time we hit super late game, like in the last couple of teams or people alive, where most of the people are all roided up and they've got all the goodies because they've killed everybody, we're back to not making much difference. A gray M4 rifle on a 200 health enemy is 4 to the head or 7 to the body, and a blue one is again 4 to the head and 7 to the body. So late game, the difference isn't very significant there either. So I think that gray versus blue only matters if your enemies have 125 total health. That's gonna either be 75 health and 50 shield because they don't have a full med kit, or the 100 health and the 25 shield because their buddy spared them a small pot. And that sort of engagement, the engagement that you most often run into after people have done their initial loot, or somewhat middle game where there's a lot of fighting and people aren't super well geared, the blue one is very important. But early game and late game, not very much. There are differences in reload times though, albeit minor differences. The gray M4 rifle reloads just a smidge slower than the other two at 2.3 seconds. The other ones are 2.2 seconds, and I find this reload to be kind of slow and annoying, again because I'm spoiled on other games where I am always just shooting like 5 shots and reloading, and every single time I go back behind cover I do like one of those super quick 1-second Call of Duty reloads. You don't need to reload these weapons that often. I would tell you to hold off on that and try to break that habit because it can definitely get you killed, and it can slow down your running. There are, between these weapons, some very minor differences in recoil, and there are minor differences between each tier in gray, green, and blue. Increasing your rifle rarity means that you will have very slightly less spread per shot and very slightly less kick on your center dot. And I do mean these differences are very slight. The maximum and minimum size of that hipfire spread, for instance, like your first shot precision, and then your full-on jumping and spraying, are going to be the same between tiers and the same with the scars. But you get a little bit less spread per shot, and I do mean a little bit, and you do get a slightly more noticeable but minor less amount of kick. And by kick, I mean how much your hipfire box is going to kick or drag or wobble or sort of try to destabilize your aim. So increasing rarities, even if it doesn't necessarily help your overall damage or time to kill sometimes, can definitely make a difference in your aim, and that's going to make a big difference at long ranges. In terms of raw DPS though, it's good to compare these to other weapons. The M4 rifles will beat all burst rifles, all scoped rifles, and most pistols. Even the blue burst rifle gets beat by the M4 in terms of raw DPS because of the amount of time that you can't shoot between the bursts. There's a big delay right there. The scoped rifles, while recently buffed and much better, are still not a DPS competitor to any of the M4 or SCAR rifles, or even the burst rifles for that matter, and you do beat most of the pistols in this game, though the revolver can do some interesting things with 2 headshots, but not all pistols. In terms of raw DPS, M4 rifles are beaten by suppressed pistols, SCAR rifles, and both of the available submachine guns. I do find it a little bit surprising that even the purple suppressed pistol will outperform some of the M4 rifles, and the gold suppressed pistol is just top tier. It outperforms all of them except for the blue one. The SCAR rifles are obviously better in terms of damage and DPS and recoil, and up close, in theory, if you're hitting all of your shots and stuff, both of the submachine guns, the suppressed one and the tactical one, will beat out an M4 rifle, though we all know that practice and theory is quite different, and I still generally avoid SMGs, though I gotta admit, the new tactical submachine gun is growing on me. The M4 rifle DPS is technically higher than that of any shotgun, if you never miss, and it also doesn't factor in shotgun headshots. So if somebody rushes you with a shotgun and you don't think they're very good, if they're not very confident in their shots, if they're spamming, it is reasonably acceptable for you to hold a position and just full-on spam them with your M4. People kind of don't expect this. They kind of expect you to swap to your shotgun and do that sort of weird, goofy bunny hopping fight. And you can kind of hose down a lot of people like this, especially bad players. You can just win the war of attrition and M4 them into the ground. So my final advice for this weapon is, of course you should use it. This is the standard rifle for most of the time that you spend in Fortnite. The SCAR weapons are rare, and the scoped rifles are much more specialized. Since this is a weapon that you're going to spend such a long time carrying and using, you should put some time and effort into mastering it and understanding it, but it's not a particularly difficult weapon to use. My personal favorite way to use it is to use it in bursts of about 2 or 3, and if they're at very long range, I will literally do one shot, one click, one trigger pull at a time and treat it much more like a DMR. When you crouch with the weapon and when you're not moving, the hipfire box gets very, very tight, where it's almost like aiming down sights for about the first 2 shots, and that's my preferred way to do it. When I get in gunfights, I usually just crouch anyway. I can't do the crazy like Fortnite jumping and strafing stuff, but I do reduce the overall size of my target, and I significantly help my accuracy. A lot of times, even though it's kind of a noob thing to do, sometimes I'll just crouch and just full auto people, and they're not prepared for that. A smarter player would probably build a little pillbox and a ramp, or maybe not engage from that sort of area, but if you have to, the DPS is quite good on these weapons, and you should rely on them much more than you should swapping or anything more specialized or complicated. Guys, that's all for this episode of Fortnite In Depth. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, and be sure to share around because I'm kind of new at this. I'm trying to pick up a Fortnite audience. Post to Reddit, share it on Twitter, do whatever you want. And in the comments below, let me know what you would like to see for the next episode. Drifter out.